Hello and welcome to Flying High with Flutter. This is your host, allenwyma, and today I'm with a very special guest. He is definitely one of the only, one of the few, if not the only, professor teaching Flutter in universities. So I'm proud to bring you guys Professor Mark Mahoney. Mark, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, Alan. My name is Mark Mahoney, and I am a computer science professor at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where Alan went. We were discussing about 10 years ago. And I don't know if I'm the only one teaching Flutter, but I did just teach a short course. The course was called Mobile App Development. I have taught the course before. Last time I taught it, though, it was straight Java and Android Studio. That's how long ago that was. Kotlin was around, but it wasn't. We used straight Java back then. So, yeah, I teach at Carthage College, and Alan, as you know, we have a regular fall and spring semester, but we also have this interesting January term, or J term, which is a really intense 3-week term where students take one course and we meet 3 hours a day. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for about 3.5 weeks. And this short course that I just taught was our J term course. Actually got pushed to May because of COVID, so I just finished recently. And it's nice because students don't have any other distractions. They're just taking this one course. So it's nice because I'm pretty much in the room when they're doing a majority of their learning, which that's a really valuable thing, I think, for the professor to be there and be able to answer questions. It's a little hard to, in such an intense, short time period, get as much content in there as like a normal fall or spring course. So that's one of the things I ran into. This is, again, the first time I taught Flutter in our J term, and I wish I had, maybe gotten a little bit more material in there. Pretty sure if I did it in the fall or the spring, that would have happened. Also, a nice thing about a regular semester is, you get the spaced repetition. There's time for material for the students to digest it and then bring it up, and so that I have a feeling if I were to teach this course again, I would like to try it in a regular semester. Yeah, so that's me.
Well, I think, I like to get a little bit more background about yourself, right? So, of course, I remember some about you, but I think it's good to hear about, like, kind of, where you came from, because I think you do have something to do with mobile, right? You think you worked in the mobile department at Motorola, or was it
Well,
somewhere else?
yep, long time ago. But I've been just finished my 19th year at Carthage teaching. But before that, for a few years, I was a developer at Motorola. But I mean, if you were to look at the phones that I was working on, this was in the early 2000s. They're not anything like today's phones, but I did for a while there. We did multimedia apps on old Motorola phones. Before that, I did also worked at Motorola, but in two-way radios.
So when you did these apps, were you using Java? Is it the Java applets time, or even before that?
It was even before that, so they had. Oh boy, now I got to remember. They had their own little framework in C, and it was kind of fun to be able to, if somebody had a Motorola Razr phone, I could always open it up and say, "You see that storage feature? I wrote that. It was 4 lines of code, but everybody had a Razr, so." But yeah, it's been quite a long time, and I haven't done much with mobile since. Like I said, I occasionally teach a J-term mobile course, but I'm frankly more into like the web and things like that. So it was, I had a lot of learning to do just to get ready for this course. But I've been around the block a while, so I think I knew what to look for and what to bring to the course.
I'm actually kind of curious. I think you're kind of selling yourself short, right? Because you do have a couple of patents, and you were at Motorola for a long time, right? So don't. I mean, I really want people to know kind of like where you're coming from, and that you're not just a hobbyist and doing 4 lines of code here and there, right?
No, I'm, I have been teaching for 20 years. I have a PhD in computer science. So.
But you're not wearing a tie. I think I remember you said as soon as you got your PhD, which was around the time when I was there, you said you could start wearing a tie all the time.
Well,
stopped it.
I don't think I even remember how to tie a tie. So.
Okay. So you're at Motorola for a long time. You did some pretty interesting things. I do remember you said you got some patents. That's kind of cool. And so, you did most of your work, I think, in C, right?
Yeah.
When you were there?
Yeah. And at Carthage, our opening sequence of courses, our CS1, CS2 data structures, are basically C++. So even to this day, I think that's a really great way to start a CS education. So having that background in C, I know you have it because you took those courses. Other schools I know nowadays don't always do that. Some start with Python. Some start with, I suppose some are still working with Java. But I really like C and C++ for the opening sequence, especially that data structures course. Because all the other languages, they'll handle the memory management for you. And I want all students to at least once have to manage that memory themselves. So, like I said, to this day we still use C++ in our intro sequence.
Do you think that's a good idea? Actually, I've been thinking about this for a while now because it seems like most of the days, modern languages, of course, even Dart, right, it manages the memory for you. I do think there's value in teaching people that, but I think that maybe that should be something a little bit down the lines because, it's tricky. Plus, writing a program in C, like there's so much boilerplate, right? Even Java, of course. Like, do you have any thoughts about that? But it sounds like you're really sure this is what you want to start off the first language with.
Yeah, I mean, we, as a department, we've thought about this and discussed this for years and years, and I don't know. We always come back, I think, to the importance of just having a C-based background. It just influences all the other things. Now, after data structures, we definitely move to other languages. We have, we have web development courses. We have paradigms courses. So I'm actually not a huge fan of C++, but I think having it as the foundation is important. Now we have some other courses. We have like a data science program now that doesn't use C. We have what we call a CS0, an introduction to programming that doesn't count towards the major, and we usually do that one in Python. I've taught that one. But if you're going to be a major, we want you to have that C background.
Yeah, I think that's good. The reason I want to dig into this is because I've been hanging around a lot of Facebook groups, and I see people always saying like, which language should I start off with? Even for Dart, right? And there's a lot of people who are actually saying start off with C or C++. And I think, looking at Dart, is that really, you think that was actually a good thing to tell people to start off with?
Yes. So
these are not CS people, right? A lot of people I've been seeing who are learning are people who want to get a job right away, or they want to make an app. So I would say they're more kind of like hobbyists rather than like serious CS majors.
Yeah. So would I suggest C++ for that? No, I'd probably suggest maybe starting with JavaScript. So some of the things I learned while teaching the course, the students were pretty good with types, right? So Dart's strongly typed. And having the C++ background, all of the students had some C++ programming. They were pretty good with generics and types, except when it came to Dart's like dynamic type, which some of the APIs, like we used Firebase in there. Some of the things that would get returned would be like a map of string dynamics, and I recall a couple students just sort of being a little bit confused about this dynamic type and.
But I think C has something similar, right? We have to do a lot of casting, or you cast like into like a string or something.
Yeah.
I'm bringing back like war horror stories from my lessons.
Yeah, I mean the C++ that we teach is it does not have all the bells and whistles, and is probably not the most modern C++ that you could use. But you could make C and C++ pretty simple to get started using. Again, if you pick the important things to learn in like a CS1 are talking about data, declaring data, selection, loops, functions, arrays, right? You can make that pretty easy to work with in C and C++. And then our CS2 is sort of just bigger types of projects, more interesting problems to solve. And then data structures is a pretty typical data structures course where we go and build all the different containers. But I would probably recommend JavaScript if somebody wants to start or learn something before Dart. Oh, so what I was saying about the students was they were pretty good with the generics and types. What my students struggled with, I think, the most were closures or anonymous functions. So we don't. Maybe you could do that in C now, but we certainly don't do that in our CS1 or CS2s. And then asynchronous programming. So with the Dart's futures. So JavaScript is. I would probably recommend JavaScript because it is C-based, right? It's got a lot of the same things that a C-based language has. But it's also got those features, anonymous functions, and in JavaScript it's promises, but it's pretty much the same thing. And that's quite a bit different than, again, some of these students had just had CS2, some had just had data structures. I had a couple older students who were graduating, and they had it not the best, but I think they were the stronger of the students. But yeah, the types, the closures, and the futures are what gave my students the most trouble. And I spent first couple days really just focusing on Dart. So we didn't get to Flutter till like day 4 or something. And that's what I would recommend too, is just you really have to understand the asynchronous programming to do all the interesting stuff you can do with Flutter.
What about streams, though? That's also a quite complicated topic, right?
Yeah.
Especially to close it and everything else.
Yeah. So streams I didn't cover in that early Dart stuff, but towards the second half of the course, when we're deep into the Flutter stuff, that's when I talked about streams.
I guess once you get a feature, then it's kind of like a feature that just keeps returning, right? So people probably were able to wrap their mind around it.
Yes, definitely. Once, I spent one of the apps I showed them, I was capturing microphone samples from a stream. There's a pub package that does that. And really by that time they had seen futures quite a bit, and that went really smoothly. Right? They just saw it as this function that's going to be repeatedly called, and by that time they sort of had wrapped their brains around it.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think it makes sense. So types and futures were really two of the biggest things. And the third one, you said third? There's a third one, right?
What did I say? Types,
dynamic, right?
Closures, and asynchronous programming.
Yeah.
Some other things
I remember.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I remember trying to explain to like my client, like, hey, we have to show like a loading bar or something, or else people are not going to understand what's going on. He's like, what are you talking about? You just press the button and the data comes. I said, no, don't you ever use an app before? Like, we need to let people know that something's going to happen. And so, yeah, I had to explain to him, and I also had to explain, I hired some people, and I had to also explain to them, like, why is it that we have futures and what we need to do when we have those, right? So,
right, your CS1, CS2, your early computer science student, the programs they're writing, they don't. It is just like that. If they need data, they basically get it right away, or they do some synchronous call, read a file or something that, probably the file doesn't have a ton of data, so it appears like everything is happening instantly. But yeah, this is actually a good lesson. I think this lesson comes up when I teach web development as well. But I think it was good for these students to see that not everything is ready right away. So that was kind of cool.
And I think also the one thing that if you want to talk about like using C and kind of using those kind of harsh lessons to learn something, right? Like I remember when I did my first iOS app using native SDK, I made the mistake of trying to make a call on the main thread, which is the wrong thing to do, right? If you ever tried that before, where your whole UI just stops. You learn real quick like about threading and what you need to do and what you shouldn't do. So that's kind of like the not so nice thing about Dart is that you do miss that lesson, but at the same time, it's nice not having to worry about blocking the main thread.
Yeah, that again is something your early CS student never really thinks about. So that's nice. The other, let's see, some other things I recall. So some students had Windows machines, some students had Macs. Some students had Android, some people had iPhones, and for the most part, I tried to have everyone use the emulator as much as possible. But some people's Windows machines were so janky that that wasn't an option. So if they had a Android, right, they could just plug in. That worked super well. But I did have one student who had kind of an older Windows machine, and she also had an iPhone. And we were kind of out of luck there. So she did. Her workaround was to basically make web apps. So that's another nice thing about Flutter is if for whatever reason the mobile platforms don't work, you can just use Chrome. And she was able to demonstrate all the same things. It just wasn't on a phone or an emulated phone.
Yeah, that is nice. A tip I picked up from somebody who was on the show quite a few episodes back is that he said that even if you're going to be making a mobile app only, you're better off just choosing the native as your computer, right? So if you're using a Mac, choose a macOS app. If you're using Windows, choose a Windows app. It's just much faster, and because you're compiling directly for the same CPU, right? So it just works out. I know when you compile for basically for a mobile app, like you can basically cook an egg on your machine while you're waiting for it to compile.
Yeah.
Some of the fans spin up like crazy.
Yeah, I think especially on the Mac side. But I think the latest Flutter, they made some fix where the compile time went from 5 minutes down to 20 seconds or something. But yeah, these students weren't, they had no clue. This girl liked her iPhone and she liked her Windows phone or her Windows computer. But for the most part, that all worked out. I think we did the installs on day one. It was not the funnest day, but pretty much everyone was set up on day one. The other 17 days, we were able to focus on writing code.
So did you go through and document the whole process, or you guys just did everything together? Because it's hard to do it together because I think you're using a Mac, right? And everybody else, if they're using Windows, that's really complicated. Yeah. So you just handed out sheets and said, go at it, and then come to me if you need help?
Well, actually, I've created this sort of medium to show basically code examples, and so I created. I call them books. They're not really books, but so I created like 20 programs that I went over the semester, and one of them, one of the early ones, just had all the installation instructions. If you're a Windows person or you're a Mac person, I don't know if you're interested. I could show you what that looked like or what this medium is.
Yeah, if you can be verbose when you explain it, so people who are only listening to the podcast can have an idea, that would be good.
Yeah. So let me see if I can share my screen.
You did see the doc I sent to you, right? That has instructions. The first line is about how to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm actually.
Make sure you got the right permissions.
I'm on a Windows machine right now.
Okay. So it should be even easier, I think. You are using Chrome, right?
Yeah, that I did do. Okay, so this was basically my textbook for the course. Let me make it a little bigger here. So, like I said, I focused early on Dart, in particular, the closures and the asynchronous stuff. But so this, what you're seeing now is called a playback, and basically it's kind of, again, like a textbook, except anything the author says about the code is going to be linked directly to that code. Let me skip forward a little bit here. So, for example, so on the right-hand side of the screen, we see basically a text editor, and then on the left, there's this little comment that's describing exactly that code, and you can click.
Is there a reason why you chose a picture from 20 years ago? Because I think you had this in when I was there.
Yes, I don't have many good headshots of myself, so when I find one, you stick with it. Yeah, I'll update that for you, Alan. But basically, you can sort of walk through all these code changes, and the author can sort of describe what's happening. Another thing you could do if you want to actually see the code be animated, there's a little play button, and you can continuously make those changes. But basically, in the very first one is where I think I put these instructions. One of the nice things about this format here is you can add videos and screenshots. So I put a bunch of screenshots. This is again on the Windows side, showing them exactly what their machine should look like. When you see this in a textbook, it's sometimes hard to follow, I think. So having the pictures, I think, helps. And then on the Mac side, again, I was able to walk the Mac people through, and I think it worked or I think it worked well because we got it all done in that first day. Usually there's always one or two stragglers that it's hard to install anything on their machines, but we got it all done.
I do want to ask you, for the Mac people, how many of them couldn't install Xcode because they just didn't have space? Must be quite a few, no?
Yeah, there were 15 students that at least started the semester, and which is a pretty normal size for a place like Carthage. I want to say there were probably 5 Macs and 10 Windows people, and I believe all 5 Macs, because they were all CS majors, they all had Xcode already installed. So if they weren't CS majors, that might have been an issue, but I think every single one of them already had Xcode. The harder install was Android Studio. Not everyone had that. And that went pretty well too. That's a pretty easy install.
Nobody was actually asking to use VS Code instead.
Well, no, we did use VS Code. Sorry about that. Yeah. So actually, I'm a big VS Code fan. So all of my examples, all the teaching I did use VS Code with the Dart and Flutter extensions, but you still need to install Xcode and Android Studio. So that's what we all did. Every single one of us, I told them they had to use VS Code. And I wonder about that decision. So one other sort of complaint I had was just the stack traces when things blew up. I found that the stack traces weren't quite as valuable as in some other languages and tools that I've used. So I was kind of wondering if I was using Android Studio, if the stack traces would have been a little bit easier to follow. I don't know if you find the same thing about the stack traces. Just finding, for example, your code versus all the Flutter code. I don't know. I thought JavaScript stack traces, they tend to be a little more valuable. I had some issues with Flutter and Dart. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're working on, but for me, I always just use Android Studio, even for whatever. There's a couple of reasons. One is I'm probably one of the fewest guys in the world who actually has a buggy Visual Studio Code. I'm not sure why it crashes on me much more than IntelliJ does. It's really weird. The other thing too is, yeah, the key bindings, I don't know, are really weird for me. But just talking about Flutter development, I think it's just easier just to click the play button. I remember you talking about in school that you say you just want to click buttons, you don't want to type stuff. So just clicking play and it just works. Having the debug stuff on the side, I mean, it all just kind of works nicely. And then like whenever I want to get the dev tools, I just click on the side panel. It's got everything I need. And, even the emulator, I just click a button. I could do everything I need to do. I can easily switch devices, which one I want to go to. So I just feel like it's just got much more features. And I think, I just find debugging in it much easier. And sometimes I do have to go through and debug an Android app. So it's easy just to say, okay, switch to Android, set the debug point.
Yeah, I think if I were to teach this course in this same way again, I might look harder into Android Studio.
The only thing is it is slightly heavier, but I mean, I think the computers nowadays, if you don't have 8 gigs, forget about it. You can barely use the word processor nowadays, or Chrome, right?
Plus, even if you are using Visual Studio Code, you still need Android Studio or Xcode. Or on my Mac, I have both Xcode and Android Studio on there. But the Macs weren't the problem. It was the Windows machines.
It's good to know. I mean, usually I've done some workshops and like especially the girls who come, they got too many pictures of their pets, so there's just and everybody wants to buy the cheapest Mac with 128 gigs, which you just fill that thing up real quick. So that's kind of the sad part.
Yeah. So like I said, we started the course sort of focusing on Dart. Then in terms of Flutter, we start with widgets. Widgets are, dominant. We talked a little bit about navigation, gathering input, using packages.
I'm kind of curious about like when you had your students, right? Did you try to explain to them what a widget is and were they actually able to get that?
Yeah. So, thing about widgets, or what I noticed the students struggled with the most, I think, was just the nesting of widgets. Most of them have never had to do that much nesting. Even with the code formatter was certainly helpful when you're doing all that nesting. Some of them, especially early on, I think did get a bit overwhelmed. But towards the end of the semester, after the 3 weeks, everyone was getting a little bit better. Your eyes change. You can see things a little bit better when you after some experience. And I think the Android Studio tools, the editor tools, were a little bit nicer than the Visual Studio Code tools. For example, I saw a few videos where if you want to wrap a widget inside another widget, I'm pretty sure this was Android Studio, you just right-click and there's an option to do that. I wasn't able to find that exact feature in the Visual Studio Code extension. Maybe it was there, maybe I just couldn't find it, but we end up doing that quite a bit, is to move widgets around, you wrap them and unwrap them. So I do like that about Android Studio.
I think there is quite a bit more things you can do with Visual Studio Code. I do remember like there's a bunch of extensions you can add that are extra, where you can generate objects are compared by reference, not by value. So they have a thing where you can just generate a class and it'll automatically generate, like you put like all the variables and it'll just generate the equals, override the equals for you. So I'm sure there must be something.
Yeah, I didn't look too hard into it, but I just grabbed I think the recommended one was the Dart and the Flutter extensions. But yeah, there probably are more extensions that would have made my life easier.
Yeah, I definitely think so. So I'm kind of curious, like, because you did come from a very interesting background. I mean, you do a lot of C, you still promote that. I think that's fine. I know for sure you did Java. Last time you did Java Android class. That would definitely solve a lot of the problems that you had, like with making sure people have all the proper dependencies, this iOS Android phone thing. Like, how did you come to the conclusion of, maybe I should do this with Dart and Flutter? I mean, there's always React Native. Like I told you before the show, there's KMM. There's so many different things you could choose.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And so I think what's most important to students when they are choosing elective classes like this was an elective, nobody had to take it, but they're definitely looking for authentic experiences. So I would say Dart is probably not optimized for teaching college students how to use it. It is a professional framework, and that makes it a little bit harder to sort of wrap your head around, especially if you're a first year or second year CS student. But they want that authenticity almost more than anything. They I think would feel like they were wasting their time if I had taught the same course the way I did it 5 years ago with using Java and Android Studio. So I have been one of the things I think I'm pretty good at as a college professor is just keeping my eyes open, seeing what's out there. And I've had my eye on Flutter for a while now.
Wait, I have to ask you a question. Did you do your typical style of asking people if you can have a sample book?
Well, there aren't many Flutter books out there. I think I had to buy my Flutter books, and I did read a couple of them. I was not a huge fan of the, so I spent the most time with one. I won't mention the one, but I feel like what I created here with my 20 programs would get you writing code a lot sooner than the 300-page book that I read.
You mean if people followed your code story, they'd be in a lot better shape, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yes. I'm, of course, biased, but when you write a book, I think there's some pressure to fill 300 pages. People want to make sure they're getting their $49 worth. And when I was reading this book, I thought, oh my gosh, there's a lot of fluff in here. Plus, going back and forth between the exposition and the code is just makes it a little bit harder. I am not too bullish on the programming book market in the future. I think whether it's this or something else, there are much better ways to, I think, just link what the author wants to show you with the code. That's I think the most important thing. So anyway, I was talking about students and they want authentic experiences, and so I've had my eye on Flutter for a while. So some of the things I look for when I'm thinking about teaching a new topic like this is just who's using it, who created it, what kind of resources are they putting into documentation. Right, so we all know Flutter's created by Google. Now Google has had some duds before, so it's not just that it's a Google thing. But their documentation I thought was excellent, and they really put a lot of effort into their documentation. Just the number of videos alone that they have, and not just somebody talking, but an actual animated video. Those have to cost a fortune to produce, and they just have hundreds and hundreds of them. To me, that was a sign that they are really taking this serious. And then I'm on Twitter and I'm on all the other social networks, and I'm just noticing people are and have been for the last couple of years really getting excited about Flutter. So all of that sort of went into my decision to use this. I'll be honest, these JTerm courses, I usually pick something that I want to learn, and it sort of forces me, I have to prepare for the course, so I have to learn it. So I'm sure we had some JTerms together. I don't know what courses I taught then, but it was likely something that I thought was cool and interesting. And it's I think a perk of this job is we're pretty nimble, so I can teach quite a few different things, especially in these JTerms. So I usually just look for something that I'm interested in, and so I made the decision to teach this course probably over a year ago, and at the time, Flutter was my number one thing that I was looking to learn. So yeah, that's how I chose that. And again, I don't know. I have to teach another JTerm course next year. I haven't decided which one yet. But this was a fun one. Like I said, the only thing I'd say is I probably didn't get as far as I would have if it was a normal semester course. I think just having the more space in between the individual class periods probably would have helped me get a little bit farther into the content.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting feedback. I was kind of curious, did you ever consider using like one of the other solutions out there instead of just using Flutter? Or did you already try this before and then you just wanted to learn Flutter?
Yeah, so I've done a little bit of work with React. So React Native probably wouldn't have been as much of a stretch for me in putting the course together. But that probably influenced why I chose Flutter, because like I said, I've done a little bit of work with React, and I wanted to learn something new. I see some potential in Flutter. Again, people are, I think, really excited about it. So, again, I was maybe being selfish and just saying, I want to learn something that I don't already know. And the best way to learn something is to actually be teaching it. So, again, maybe I selfishly chose it because of that.
As I said, the even better way to learn is to volunteer to teach something, so then you have to learn it, and then you can teach it to reinforce it, right?
Exactly. Your feet are on the fire once you say you're going to do a course.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially when you get like some of these questions that you never even thought about, like what's a stream and why do we even have to have it? Or, I mean, obviously that's a little bit more clear, but
yeah,
why do we have to have a text style for the style and not call it style in general? Or why does button colors have to be so complicated to do?
Yeah.
I don't know that one. I guess because you got different types of buttons if you press it or not, right? There's different types of styles you can have, but
or edge insets. Yeah. Yeah, I think teaching is a great way of, like I said, learning something. It doesn't have to be formal teaching necessarily like I'm doing, but like I would recommend to your audience, writing blog posts. I think is a great way to sort of get your name out there. And there are all kinds of platforms nowadays where you can build up a following just on your technical blog posting. So there's Medium, there's the dev community. There's all kinds of places where you can do that. And if you are a student, I always recommend students become tutors. So I don't know if you were a tutor way back when. Were you a tutor?
No, I'm pretty sure Nick was.
Ah, okay.
Nick Romick, yeah.
Yeah. So just like you said, once you start helping people, and you might have some idea clearly in your mind, like that's the only way anyone is ever going to think about it. And then you sit down next to someone who maybe has less knowledge than you, and they come up with these really interesting questions. So my entire when I was in college, I was a tutor, and I was always amazed by I thought I knew everything, and then I'd talk to this person I was working with, and they'd say, "Well, why don't you do it like this?" And it just blew my mind. So, and that still happens. I've been teaching full time for 20 years, so I love that part. Just getting, you probably remember my style is not really to try and give some great performance, some great lecture. What I really like to do is do a little bit of that, but really I like to walk around the room and talk to people, answer questions, and I think it all goes back to my days as being a tutor when I was in college. I think it's so much more valuable. I really feel like my job is mostly to motivate students, right? So I don't give great lectures or anything like that. I'm not a super dynamic speaker. But what I think I'm pretty good at is motivating people to want to learn. So I feel like all programming it's really like being a wizard, right? You come up with these spells and we can make magic things happen. Okay, and to me, I still get excited about that. I really love that. I can't believe I get paid to do what I do. And I think that enthusiasm probably rubs off on a lot of students. And so that's what I feel like my job is you can't learn to be a great programmer just by watching me. So I'm pretty good. You can learn some things from watching me code, but the way you're going to become a great programmer yourself is you just have to make all the mistakes that programmers make. I don't think there's any shortcuts. So if I can motivate the student to work on the homework assignment or to sometimes I work with students over the summer on research type things. If I can motivate them to do that, I know they're going to learn. And that's what I feel my job is, just to motivate.
I was just thinking about how you said, Cygnus is somebody who knows less than you. You can learn quite a bit. I seem to remember one time you were telling us about, you remember taking comp org, right, with the gates. Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned it to some guy, why don't you just add an AND gate or an OR gate at something at your work, and the guy just laughed at you and just walked away.
Yeah, so I worked at Motorola, and Motorola is not a software company. I think they've been around quite a long time, and the culture there is it's dominated by electrical engineers. And we were having, I don't even remember the issue, but the electricals were working on something, trying to solve some particular problem. And as a software guy, I consider myself a pure software guy. I made some suggestion, and it was probably ridiculous. And yeah, I think I got laughed out of the room. But I learned my lesson. I don't know enough about electrical engineering.
So in that case, the guy learned nothing from you in this in this instance.
Yeah, in this particular case, although maybe they learned something about how software developers see things, who knows? I'm
I
still
mean,
friends with
never.
still friends with
I
that
said
guy.
never. So say never to invite you back into the room in this situation. Okay, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. I think there's a lot of things we're getting from you, right? So part of the reason that I wanted you to be on here is because I wanted to kind of get, a lot of people are trying to learn, taking Udemy, taking Coursera, doing the cookbooks. I think they're called YouTube videos like crazy.
Yeah, the cookbooks were good. Just like I said, the straight documentation I thought was excellent. They Google's really it's a sign to me. I think to people in the know, if if people are putting the effort in the documentation, that's a sign. I think React documentation is excellent also, which is not surprising. Google's all or Facebook is all in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what, it's always good to have somebody else kind of in the room and helping you, right? So I don't think universities have necessarily lost their edge. Of course, they're not as good as they used to be. They're not as kind of like as I don't know what you call that, as honored or as thought of as being the best. But I think it's good to hear that like established places of education are actually looking at Flutter and teaching it and saying this is. It's really interesting that too. That you said you're coming at this not from. I mean, when I did JTerm, it was more of like a fun thing. Like I remember one of the courses was I think with Gottlieb, and he said this is building your own evil robot army, right? So that's obviously a fun course.
Yeah.
This one, you said no. My students wanted something serious, right? And you said this is a serious framework.
Yeah, and some of the students may have been not quite ready for it. So we started with 15. Not all 15 stuck with it. So yeah, you're right. These short courses, they tend to have, sort of a fun aspect. I hope my course was fun. I know for some of the students it was definitely fun, but it was a hard course. But every one of these courses gets the regular number of credits earned, so it should be there should be some depth to it, and I think this one had it. Yeah, a lot of other courses that I guess I was competing with would be, I think there was a knitting class, the mathematics of knitting. I think there was some sort of brewing course where you learn how to brew beer. And then in regular years, there would be trips, trips to Egypt to, look at the pyramids or things like that. So those are definitely like once in a lifetime experiences. I think those are great. But this one ended up being a pretty darn hard course, but valuable. And I think it all goes back to that authenticity. So by the end, we were making apps that talk to this Firestore database, and there were a couple students at the end. They knew more than I did, and I could see them, this summer getting an internship as a mobile developer or for their senior thesis making some sort of mobile app. So I think it was a pretty valuable experience. I hope so, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, after teaching the course, like, do you feel that Flutter really is something that people should seriously consider, or is it something that you can kind of play around with? Because, I mean, being able to cook something quickly up and running, you're going to hit a roadblock later on, right? If you look at like Twitter with Rails, right? They kind of ran into some issues, I think. What do you think?
I think it's around to stay. Yeah. So I know we talked before we started recording about just state management, and yeah, that was a pretty hard thing for the students to grasp. Right. So again, in all the programming they've done up to this point, they've never had to do anything like that. So that took a while, but we see that in other reactive frameworks as well. So I think it's a great lesson. If they want these components or these widgets to be reusable, this is one of the better ways to do that. If they don't care about reusability, well then we could use the old the DOM style of going and picking apart the DOM. But after 10, 20 years of doing that, I think people in the know know that there are issues associated with that. So this is a great way to sort of get that authentic experience into the classroom. So I'm pretty high on Flutter, and in one of the videos, one of the Google videos, they say it's among the most the things developers are most interested in learning. That's another good sign that I think this thing has legs.
Yeah, I think I just seen recently that I think Flutter just passed like React in the amount of apps on the App Store. I can't remember now. I wouldn't doubt it at this point because so many people are just building Android apps with this because it's very easy to get started. React state management is also another beast, I think, that is really hard to tackle. I mean, working with React, and like I did React before I did this, and I don't want to touch React ever again. It was just, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I was working in the bank, we had one HTML page with 200 rows. It took over 30 seconds just to render 200 rows. And it wasn't like there was a lot of data. It was just, if you don't know what you're doing, you can hurt yourself, right? But with Flutter, I mean, you could do the same. I have done the same, but nothing as bad as that. But also, like, it's much harder. And especially if you have proper state management, it's even harder, right? If you just stick with, like, streams.
Yeah. No, I really like Dart. Maybe it's because of I grew up on statically typed compiled languages, so object-oriented languages. So I really like that about Dart. Of course, the JavaScript that's cool as well, and I probably day to day do much more JavaScript development than I'll probably end up doing Dart development. But yeah, I think Dart really struck a chord with me. I thought it was great.
Yeah, we did talk with one of the creators of Dart recently, so when his episode comes out, you should definitely check it out. He's got a lot to say. It's interesting, his whole background. I mean, he even worked on Hotspot, if you knew that or not. That's quite interesting background. That's why you can see when you type Dart, it's like JavaScript plus Java together. It's really weird.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't go into the mechanics of it all. That's one of the things I just didn't have time to look at. You know, another thing I didn't get a whole lot of time to look at. I'm kind of curious what you know about it, but just testing Flutter apps. What's that world like? What do I need to know about testing in Flutter?
I do testing. I don't think there's anything special. You're going to have Mockito for sure to step out certain things. But the only thing that I find difficult is trying to find the right things to like tap on or whatever. Because unless you add a key to it, it's really difficult to find the right one. So that's the only thing. Like you can find like a text box using semantics, like saying like look for this label or something. But to find like if you have two buttons with the same name, it becomes more difficult. Even if one's like a text button, one is like a flat button or whatever, it's really difficult to go in between and choose which button you want.
So do you end up just putting a key on everything?
I stopped before that one, but before I'd put keys on everything, and so I may just do that. I have had keys become useful when I needed something to actually update. So I think keys are good. I don't think you went into keys, but keys are something that you really need to know when you want to go from intermediate to expert or even sometimes a little bit higher intermediate stage because, yeah, there may be times where you do expect an update from a stream and it just doesn't happen. Explaining what types of keys those are also difficult to explain, right? You got object keys, you got value keys, you got global keys. I'm guessing you used the form too, right? So that must have been a key with that one too, with the form state.
Yeah, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on them, but again, to be honest, I'm not a Flutter expert. So, but I think again for the basics, I would say my stuff, my content here is just beginner level type stuff. But yeah, keys that's a big topic.
Yeah, I think Do you have anything else you wanted to mention about this? Or otherwise, I think I want to start getting into wrapping this up because we took a lot of your time and I think you gave a lot of knowledge, right?
Uh, yeah, no, I don't. I don't have anything else.
Okay. After kind of playing with Flutter for some time and your background, right, over 20 years experience, uh, I guess way over 20 years by now, but I mean like in the field, right? What do you think Flutter is a good solution? Like, when do you think it's a good time to actually use it?
Well, certainly mobile. Mobile is taking over. Uh, I really like the fact that you have the single code base. You don't have to have two teams working on your mobile app. I'm excited about the web, right? So being able to reuse that code even for your web app. And I understand they're working on a desktop solution as well. So the fewer
I have
things.
actually used. I say I have actually used the desktop even before it was out, so it's pretty good.
I mean, the fewer things that you have to learn. Anybody with any web experience knows, that just the stack of things you have to learn is outrageous. So I think it's really cool that this tool is targeting basically all our most common computing devices. I think that that could be a game changer.
So you think, whenever you want to target any kind of those major platforms, you think Flutter is a good choice?
Right now, for sure, it's in the mobile side. I guess we'll have to see what happens on the web and then eventually on the desktop as well. So we'll see.
So being somebody who's actually in the education sector, like, and also you had to learn it yourself, like, how do you feel about the state of education in Flutter, like, when you want to actually learn it? I mean, do you think it's good enough? I mean, or did you struggle, or?
Like I said, it's. I don't think it's optimized for college students to learn, but I also think it wasn't that bad. Now, like I said, I've been around a while, so I was able to pick it up pretty easily, and hopefully I was able to present it in a way where the students picked it up easily. Um, Dart. A lot of people haven't heard of Dart. Uh, might be nice if sort of that got more. If more people were aware of Dart. Dart has some cool things. So the name constructors, I know I liked setting the instance parameters right in the constructor parameters. That was cool. Named parameters, I know Ruby has that. That's pretty cool. But it's a pretty typical, pretty standard, object-oriented language. Yeah, I'd like to see there be a little more buzz behind Dart. I guess I think that could only help Flutter.
Yeah, when I learned Flutter, I basically learned Flutter and then I went back to Dart. So it's kind of interesting that you went first to Dart and then to Flutter.
Yeah,
Do you
that
think?
that book I read, they took the same approach. They had an appendix that had a whole bunch of Dart stuff, and they said, you can read that if you want, but we're just going to dive right into the Flutter stuff. And I found myself wishing I had read the appendix first. So when I was, starting with the course, I made the conscious decision I was going to spend, a good portion of the beginning on Dart. I really think with like I said, with the futures and the asynchronous code and the closures, at least for my students, I knew that was not going to be something they could just pick up easily, especially in the context of all the widgets and the streams and everything. So the way I went, and I'm pretty happy with it, was to start with Dart and then work my way into Flutter. If I had to do it again, I'd do it the same way.
Okay, that's interesting. I think I found most people go straight into Flutter and then say dig into Dart later. So I also tend to think that way too. But I can see how getting the idea of Dart first would make more sense. I think the thing that would throw me off if I went into Dart first would be when you do your build method for your widgets, right? It's just constructor, constructor, constructor. It's not normal what I would say Dart code, right? It's very Flutter-esque, where you just construct all of your things every single time, all over again. That I think is very weird.
That is weird. Again, very different than what any first or second year CS student will learn. But like I said, the named constructors, the named parameters. I didn't want to have to sort of explain that in the context of all the widget stuff going on. So I do think it's valuable sometimes to separate some of these topics. I had them write many in those first couple days, many sort of these lab problems that didn't count for much in Dart, and I think that helped when we got to the Flutter stuff, because the Flutter's got its own, like you said, the build method and the nesting of widgets. To have to explain all of that and all of this sort of Dart stuff, I thought it was just better to separate those two.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that. Do you have any tips or kind of tricks for beginners? I think you gave some before, but I was curious if you had anything that really stands out.
Like I said, the asynchronous programming, if you don't have a lot of experience with that, that's so critical to everything that happens in Flutter that I would focus on that. In order to learn that, you need to know about these anonymous functions, these closures. The rest of Dart, like I said, is pretty straightforward. If you know one object-oriented programming language, picking up Dart shouldn't be hard. But those extra little topics, I think, are worth spending some more time on.
Do you have any warnings for people so they don't get into some kind of trap?
Just again, there's some issues with the power of certain machines, and trying to run Android apps on Macs, and so like all people writing code, I would say, trying to have as high-powered machine as possible.
Yeah, I get a lot of people asking online saying, is this machine good enough? Or what kind of machine should I have? What kind of processor? Is i3 okay? Can I have how much RAM, etc.?
You think you get that question a lot. Every fall I get it 20 times from parents who are trying to buy their students a computer. I did development on both my Windows machine and my Mac, and I thought it was seamless. Once you learn it on one, it's pretty much the same on the other. So I think they did pretty well there too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That is a nice part. I did want to ask you about state management. Right? I think you said you only worked with Provider, right? You never did anything else.
Correct. And most of the examples here, especially in part 2. So I always started my examples just using stateful widgets, and at the end of each one of these I would switch over to Provider. And so I noticed, or I looked at what students were doing, and in all the apps that they were building, they were just sticking with stateful widgets. Even though I showed them Provider and I tried to explain the pain point that it was solving, I think they couldn't quite grasp in the 3.5 weeks that we had really what Provider is doing for them. So again, their apps weren't super complicated. They weren't as nested as maybe some more professional apps, but I think for simplicity, they were able to sort of wrap their head around the stateful widget where, like I said before, if you want to make these things reusable, we can only pass data down, right? So data and methods down. They seem to sort of grasp that. Now, if they had more time, if they were building bigger apps, I think then one of these tools like Provider, I think a light bulb would have went off in their head, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, that does make my life a little bit easier." But each one of these examples, it does. Let me see if I can find one here. Let's see, am I using it here? Yeah, change notifier. So somewhere up until this point, I just use a stateful widget. Yeah. And then I switch to Provider. Again, I don't know how, maybe I didn't explain it as well as I could have, but what I noticed in the students' apps where they ended up just using stateful widgets and passing all their data and methods through the widgets. Which, if they got that, I was pretty happy that they got that. Even.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of, I mean, you have to kind of feel the pain before you start reaching for Provider, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, and we didn't have enough time for them to feel the pain, I don't think.
Yeah, I think I went through the first 4 to 6 months not using anything, and then I was like, this is horrible. I got to use something else.
Yep, exactly.
So you can get quite far with set state. So I think, do you have any kind of opinion? I mean, it seems like you're still quite new into Flutter. I don't think you play around different solutions for state management. Like, do you have any idea about why this is such a complicated topic, or anything from your background that might give you some kind of clue? Because it seems like it's like a flame war whenever you talk about how you manage your state.
Well, again, I think it has to do with reusability of components. So if you look at the web, pre-React, what we would do is we would just use the DOM to go and find something and grab the data. But managing that DOM, that has its own issues as well. That can be, equally a nightmare. So, I think all the reactive frameworks have sort of taken this different approach. It's a really interesting approach, I think. So I don't know. I guess I don't have enough experience because I only really looked at Provider. It seems like Google has chosen that one to be that one's in most of their cookbooks and demos. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have enough experience to really compare them.
Okay, and I think my final question I have for you, right, is somebody. I've been looking at your code, right? It looks like it's pretty much pre-Flutter 2. I don't know which version of Flutter you guys use, but with Flutter 2, right, they have definitely Flutter 2.2. They have null safety, right? So, like, sorry, what do you want to say?
I know. I was just going to say I touched on that briefly. I think all of this code was written with Flutter 2 or higher. But again, that's one of the things where, there were so many other things to sort of focus on that that certainly wasn't a emphasis of the course. But yeah, I did talk about it briefly.
So my question is, like, when Flutter 2 came out, and then now Flutter 2.2, I don't know if you took a look at it. Do you feel that things are really getting interesting now? Like, do you feel it's going to bring more people to the table? Do you have any feelings about it?
Yeah, so I just saw the Google I/O happened, I think, last week, right? And I watched some videos. It all looks exciting. Again, there are more signs, more signals that Google is really behind this. So the null safety in particular, I think is interesting. I know there's a classic CS figure who said coming up with null pointers was like his $1 billion mistake. And that was 50, 60 years ago. So yeah, I think this is kind of interesting. I think C# has a similar set of operators and philosophy on null safety. So I like that Dart is picking a lot of the interesting features from other languages and bringing them together. So I don't know. If I was a mobile person, I'd be pretty excited these days about Flutter.
Okay. Yeah, I also think so too. I can't see a good reason why not to use it. Even as somebody who's used native SDKs before, it's not even about how hard they are, but just like you get nearly any platform you want. And I think it's just much easier. I just find it to be much easier, not to mention the code reusability. And now we can finally make a decent UI. That was probably my biggest one, is that making a decent UI is so hard in Android and iOS.
Yeah. If people like you and me can do it, that means anyone can do it.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you'd like to do a shout out for, or anything else you wanted to bring up?
Shout outs. I am, again, the creator of this new medium for guiding people through code. If anybody wants to check that out, currently I'm storing all of my work here on GitHub. And I think I put a link, or I think I gave you the link, so maybe they can find it there.
We'll be sure to add it. Yeah, definitely, because this is pretty cool.
But yeah, Alan, I remember the thing I remember most is the discussions we used to have in my office or after class. And I'm really glad we got a chance to do this. We should do it more often.
Well, I mean, if you ever teach the class again, especially in a longer format, it'd be great to hear more about how it's going, right? Or if you ever choose another state management solution or anything, it's always good to hear. Okay, so thanks for having you on, and hopefully we have you on again in the future.
Yep, it was nice to talk to you, Alan.
Yep.
Bye now.